I live in a small town in southern Texas, probably about a 20-minute drive to the border of Mexico. I am 16 years old, and this is my first time being so far from my home on the west coast. My father is a coast guardsman who was stationed here to provide extra help to Border Patrol. At the time, the politics of this was beyond me. As far as I was concerned, I was forced away from my friends, family, and pretty much everything I knew. I would start my sophomore year of high school here. I was nervous. All the kids would already have their pre-established friend groups. My dad gave me several warnings. If anyone offers you a free cell phone, don't take it. It's probably drug traffickers. They will call the phone and threaten to kill your family if you don't do a job for them. Be careful of people inviting me places I don't know. Since I am white in an area dominated by low-income families, I can be used for a large ransom as people will assume my family has money. Thanks, Dad. Way to make me feel better about being forced here against my will. School started without too much of a hitch. It was not as bad as I figured it would be. The other students were welcoming, and I soon had a few people I would talk to regularly. But I could tell by the way they talked and their body language that we weren't friends yet. In my second week of school, I met Gabe. Gabe was a chill dude, always wearing band tees and Converse, talking about his favourite bands and how he wanted to be a professional guitar player. Me and him got along great. I would say he was my first real friend. "Justin, do you want to come to my place this weekend and chill?" Gabe asked me as we walked through the crowded hallway. "For sure, dude. I think we can sneak some beer from my dad," I offered. I would not be able to sneak any beer. I knew I would get caught, but fitting in was far more important to me. "Nah, don't worry about it." Gabe dismissed the idea. "I've got plenty. I'm Mexican, pendejo. Getting beer is easy." Gabe seemed to gloat. I was relieved that I wouldn't be stealing my dad's beer. "I'm going to have a couple other friends over too. It's going to be like a small party, man." "Sweet, dude. Sounds like a plan. Let's get stupid this weekend," I responded. I knew there was a reason I liked you. Gabe beamed and held up a fist. I bumped his fist with mine, and we split to our separate classes. I told my dad I got invited over for a sleepover. I gave him the address of the house. My father was a military man and no idiot. He wrote down the address and gave me some father-son advice. "Listen, kid, I was your age once. If you aren't drinking this weekend, I know you will eventually. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you are forced to drive with a drunk driver, you call me. I will pick you up, no questions asked, no punishment." I nodded. He walked up to the fridge and pulled out a beer. He held the can horizontally as he flipped out his pocket knife and stabbed the hole near the bottom of the can. "This is called shotgunning. Honestly, I shouldn't be teaching this to you, but I want you to fit in as bad as you want to fit in. You hit them with one of these right off the bat, and you will have instant respect." He lifted the can up, and in a flash popped the top and chugged the entire thing through the hole. I was impressed. I practiced the shotgun with one of his beers before my buddies arrived to grab me. "Remember, kid, call me if you need me." He put his pocket knife into my hand, and with that, I was off. Including me and Gabe, there were 4 people total in the car. Gabe was in the front passenger seat. I was in the back with some guy I didn't know, and some girl I'd never met was driving. The guy next to me passed me a beer and introduced himself. "Sup, I'm Jeremy." Jeremy was on the thicker end of the weight spectrum, but he carried it well, and you could tell he was strong. I decided I would put my dad's advice to the test. Before I answered, I flipped out the knife and proceeded to shotgun the beer. "I'm Justin." It had the desired effect. I heard Gabe let out a cheer from the front seat. "Coolest new kid ever," came Gabe's voice. I was smiling in pride. "Mad respect, bro. That was dope," said Jeremy. Hey, don't be doing that crap in my car. Wait till we get to Gabe's. No more drinking in here. The girl's voice sounded annoyed, the Hispanic accent she had only adding to the whip-like effect her voice carried. We chatted for the rest of the ride about our favourite bands, the kids at school we didn't like, and the girls we thought were hot. Finally, we arrived at Gabe's place. It was your standard suburban home. It looked run down and unkempt, but not unlivable. The lawn was just a patch of dead grass, and the house itself looked dirty. Inside of the house was better. It was clean and smelled of incredible Mexican food. We went directly into Gabe's room. His room was about average size and contained a bunk bed and a desk. Under the desk was a guitar amp. On the wall hung an acoustic guitar and an electric guitar. The carpet was brown shag, and despite its ugly appearance, it was very comfortable to step on. Gabe sat on his bed, and the girl sat next to him. Jeremy grabbed a chair and rolled it to me, then proceeded to pull out the amp to use as a seat. "Pass a beer to me and Nissa," came Gabe's voice. Jeremy reached under the desk and pulled out an 18-pack of some beer I had never heard of. The name was in Spanish. He passed the beer out to everyone. "Warm beer, my favourite." Nissa's sarcastic tone of voice conveyed her displeasure, but she opened the can and drank it anyway. I was noticing that Nissa was very pretty. She had long, straight brown hair, a slender figure, and large, dark brown eyes. She didn't seem to be with Jeremy or Gabe romantically, so I figured I might stand a real chance. I decided to wait for the night to progress to see how she acted towards me before trying anything. Around 11 at night, Jeremy tossed the empty beer box into the middle of the room. "We need to get more. Let's go," Jeremy's voice commanded us. Nissa rolled her eyes at him. "Yeah, and who put you in charge? It's my car we're risking, and I don't think I want to risk it." "Come on, Nissa, it's just a beer run," Gabe rebuted. Nissa finally gave in, and we all loaded up. We drove for about 15 minutes until we came to a dirt road off the side of the main street. It was more like a wide pathway than an actual road. I became slightly nervous when Nissa switched off the headlights as we turned into it. It was surrounded by trees and tall brush on either side. Eventually, we came to a stop at a small clearing. We got out, and I noticed we were at the edge of a body of water. The river was about 40 yards across, and I could see a small, lit-up building on the other side, a bit inland. "That's the gas station we get our beer from," Gabe explained as he pointed to the lights. "And this," he pointed to the water, "is the Rio Grande. It's incredibly easy to cross here because of how narrow it is," he explained. "Wait, you mean the Rio Grande River? The border? As in Mexico is on the other side? That Rio Grande?" I questioned in worried tone. "That's the one," Jeremy answered in Gabe's place. "You gonna chicken out, new kid?" Nissa's voice quipped. She folded her arms like wings and balked at me like a chicken. With my teenage pride and reputation on the line, I faked confidence and prepared to cross. "So, how do we cross? Do we just swim?" I asked. They laughed and Jeremy pulled out a small rowboat out from the brush. We all squeezed in and prepared for a short journey across the river. The water was calm and it was almost pitch black, making us virtually undetectable. I couldn't believe I was going to cross the border to buy beer and then cross back. As scared as I was of getting caught, it was exhilarating to be breaking the rules in such a manner. We made it to the other side without issue. We pulled the boat up on land and hid it in the tall grass. "Welcome to Mexico," Gabe patted my back. The gas station was probably a quarter-mile inland. It would take about 5 minutes to reach. I thought I could hear rustling in the grass around us, but figured it was just the wind or some animals. Nissa and Jeremy talked about getting a different brand this time, when 3 people in ski masks and jackets appeared from the grass in front of us. We all froze. "Gabe, is this not... He cut me off. Shut up. I did as he said and shut my mouth. The men started talking in Spanish and Gabe and Jeremy talked back to them. After about a minute, Gabe turned around and shouted, "Run!" One of the men grabbed Nissa before she had a chance. I ran as fast as my feet would take me. I made it all of about 15 feet before I was tackled to the ground by other men who were hiding in the brush. I pulled out the knife my dad gave me and stabbed the man in the leg with all my might. I heard a howl of pain and took the chance to squirm out of the man's grip and right into another. I fell backwards and found myself looking down the barrel of a pistol. "That's enough, kid," came the man's deep voice from behind his mask. "If you try to pull anything like that again, I'll shoot you in both legs." I gulped and nodded, too afraid to speak. The man stabbed in the leg came limping around. He walked up to me, stared me in the eyes a moment, and backhanded me across the face. I screamed in shock and pain and fell over from the force, tears stinging my eyes, and some kind of cloth was pulled over my head. It smelled of sweat and cigarettes. I was pulled up to my feet and they confiscated my phone. I had my hands bound in front of me with a thick zip tie. I was walking for what seemed like hours. They occasionally nudged me, correcting my course, turning here and there. I was eventually loaded into a vehicle and felt all hope of escape leave my body as the engine roared to life. I had no way to tell where I was being taken. I couldn't tell what direction we were heading or how fast we were moving. I tried to remember all the turns we took like they did in the movies, but soon realised it was a futile effort. I found that without being able to see anything, it was hard to tell how long we had been driving. I figured it was probably about an hour or so. The drive became rougher, and I assumed we were now off any paved road and driving on dirt. This kept up for another half hour or so. The vehicle finally began to slow, and I felt the vehicle jerk as the park was engaged. I was pulled out and walked a short distance. Through the cloth, I could see the warm orange glow and hear the crackle of fire. The familiar smell of campfire filled my nostrils. The cloth was taken off my head. I looked around in a vain attempt to see where I was. We were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but hard dirt in all directions. The night was clear, but the moon did little to light the area. The bonfire and hanging lanterns were the only discernible sources of light. I saw several rusty metal tables with white bricks wrapped in plastic stacked all over them. There were a few men with rifles hanging across their chests standing guard. I took a deep breath to keep myself calm. I was fairly sure I'd been kidnapped by a drug cartel. Nissa was brought to stand next to me, and then Jeremy on my other side. I was relieved to see they were okay. We all exchanged glances, but none of us said a word, afraid of what would happen if we talked. A man in a dark maroon button-down shirt tucked into his blue jeans approached us. The top button was undone, and his thick chest hair was peeking out. He was sporting a thick black mustache. A holster with a large pistol rested on his hip. You could tell by his body language and the way the men cleared a path for him that he was in charge here. "I brought them, sir, just like you asked." Gabe's sheepish voice came from behind us. "Yes, you sure did." The man's deep voice was smooth and friendly with a Hispanic accent, giving off a comforting vibe. He gestured for Gabe to approach. Gabe walked to him nervously. He was not bound like the rest of us. I exchanged glances with Jeremy and Nissa. Nissa stood resolute, her face showing no sign of emotion. I would have believed that she was calm, but the tears rolling down her face betrayed her. "And you did well, my child. Your family will not be harmed." He turned around and took a single step away. "Ah, but I can't have any loose ends walking around now, can I?" Gabe stood rigid and said nothing. In practiced motion, the man turned around, unfastening the holster to his gun, and shot Gabe in the forehead. Nissa screamed as Gabe's lifeless body crumpled to the ground. I squeezed my eyes shut and looked away, fighting with a vomit that wanted to escape my stomach. The man squatted over Gabe's body and gave a silent prayer. "Worry not, child. Your family will be safe." The man made a gesture, and 2 men came to drag Gabe's body away. "You know, the government has been making things harder of late," the man began to explain as he approached us. "Cracking down on our operations, raiding our safe houses, boarding our ships. We have been forced to find creative ways to make money." He examined us carefully. "And you 3 will do wonderfully. As a man of God, I am not entirely happy about what is to be done with you. But life is game, and I play to win." He shrugged in spite of himself and looked over his shoulder to one of the guards with the rifles. "How long until the buyer arrives?" he barked. "The buyer is here, sir," the man shouted back. My heart was beating so intensely, I was afraid it was going to explode out of my chest. We were ushered to the other side of the camp, towards a black, windowless van. 2 men stood at the rear of the van, dressed in long, loose, dark red robes with hoods pulled over their faces. "If your people didn't have money, I would murder the lot of you where you stood." My captors spat at the feet of the robed men. Their only response was to open the van doors and pull out a briefcase. They opened it to reveal stacks of cash, both in American dollars and Mexican pesos. "Count it," my captor commanded to one of his men. After about 10 minutes of high-tension silence, the man stood up and announced that the money was all accounted for. "May you rot," the leader hissed to them as he pushed us towards the robed men. We were loaded into the van and the doors were shut behind us. We were soon on our way again, to a new place, filled with new horrors. None of us spoke. We only looked at each other with worried glances. Gabe's murder was still fresh in our minds. The van stopped and we were ushered out. I looked around again, hoping to recognize anything, but again found it hopeless. The only thing of note was the large, warehouse-like building that we were being shepherded into by the robed men. We entered through a door on the side of the building. The inside was dark, only lit by large white candles. Pentagrams decorated the walls, and the skulls of various animals and humans filled the spots the pentagrams did not. I could feel the beads of sweat dripping down my face, despite the cool air of the place. I felt Nissa's hand grasp the back of my shirt. She was shaking. I was in no better shape. Eventually, we were ushered into a large open room. 5 braziers stood in a large star formation, each at the tip of a giant pentagram that decorated the floor. In the middle of the pentagram stood a tall wooden structure. I squinted my eyes, trying to figure out what it was. I felt my entire body chill at the realization. It was a small gallows. The room was filled with robed people. Hoods darkened the faces of all of them. Nissa was grabbed first. She was dragged towards the gallows as she screamed, overpowered by the 2 people that held her. I wanted to help her. Every fibre of my being told me to man up and help her. But I was too afraid, frozen in fear. Nissa sobbed for help. I felt tears roll down my cheeks. I looked at Jeremy standing next to me. He was crying too. One of the robed figures pulled the rope down and tied it around Nissa's feet. They hoisted her into the air feet first until her head was about 6 feet off the ground. Another robed figure appeared from the crowd and walked towards the center of the pentagram. Her robe dropped to the ground, revealing the nude body of one of the most beautiful women I have ever laid eyes on. She stood directly under Nissa. I could faintly see as shimmers reflecting orange firelight fell to the ground. They were Nissa's tears. The figures around us stood in a circle formation and began chanting in a language I did not understand. I could hear drums banging in ritual fashion. The figure stepped up onto the gallows towards Nissa with a curved knife. She thrashed as he approached. With a single fluid motion, he slit her throat. She thrashed about and made gurgling noises as the blood drained from her. The woman, standing naked below, showered in the blood. Eventually, Nissa's body stopped moving, but the blood kept coming. The woman just stood there, her arms outstretched towards the sky, reveling in it. The thick blood coated her skin, giving it a sickening red sheen. She held her eyes closed, and a large smile stretched across her face. I felt something tap my arm. It was Jeremy. He whispered in a shaky voice, "We have to make a break for it. They aren't watching us. It's our only chance." I looked. He was right. They were all focused on the macabre display at the centre. I nodded and bolted the way we came. Jeremy was not far behind me. I heard shouts as we traversed the hallways. There was only one way to go. I found the door we entered through and burst out of it. I sprinted as fast as I could towards the darkness. I heard Jeremy scream and looked back. He had been tackled near the door. I saw a robed figure bash him in the face with the butt of his knife, shutting him up. "I'm sorry," I shouted and turned around to continue my sprint. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I said to myself as I ran. I was thankful for the cover of night and the tall brush. They couldn't drive out here, and I was smaller than them, giving me a slight advantage. Eventually, I stopped hearing their shouts. I kept moving, determined to put as much space between them and I as possible. After hours of walking, I came upon a road. I followed it. It had to lead somewhere. It wasn't like I had any other option. Eventually, the sun came up as I walked. With a new light, I was able to see a town down the street. With new resolve and hope, I walked towards it, carefully watching over my shoulder for any type of black van. I came upon a convenience store and walked in. The clerk looked at me with worried eyes and started to speak to me in Spanish, looking me over. "English?" I said to him. He looked disappointed and shook his head no. He handed me a water bottle and walked into the back room, and came back with a girl who looked to be around 20. She spoke English, with a heavy accent. "Are you okay? What happened to you? You're covered in blood and dirt." Her voice conveyed genuine worry. The question forced me to recall the night, causing me to sob uncontrollably. She hugged me and motioned for the clerk to call the cops. At the end of the day, I found myself in a police cruiser heading home. I told both Mexican and American cops what had happened in full detail. I showed them the spot with the boat and the place we had been ambushed. As far as I know, the investigation is still ongoing, but no arrests have been made yet. We moved to a new town further north and took on new names under witness protection. My father's orders still stood, but now he assisted in illegal immigration in the town we lived in, rather than on the border. I had not tried to make any new friends. I was a loner now, and I was okay with that. Today, I was walking through a Target, looking for some new clothes. I'd found a shirt that I liked, and figured that would be enough for today and went to check out. "Will that be all today, sir?" came the voice of the woman manning the checkout station. "Yes, that'll be it." I looked up at a beautiful face with her large brown eyes and smile I recognized. Panic welled up in me. It was the same woman who had bathed in Nissa's blood. I took my shirt from her with a shaky hand. She watched me with a big smile as I walked in cold fear towards the door. As I was about to walk out, she licked her lips and winked at me.